Cymbeline, ʻsɪmbᵻliːn, also known as Cymbeline, King of Britain, is a play by William Shakespeare, set in ancient Britain and based on legends that formed part of the matter of Britain concerning the early Celtic British King Cunobeline. Although listed as a tragedy in the First Folio, modern critics often classify Cymbeline as a romance or even a comedy, like Othello and The Winter's Tale. It deals with the themes of innocence and jealousy. While the precise date of composition remains unknown, the play was certainly produced as early as 1611. Characters. Synopsis. Cymbeline, the Roman Empire's vassal king of Britain, once had two sons, Guiderius and Arviragus, but they were stolen 20 years earlier as infants by an exiled traitor named Belarius. Cymbeline now discovers that his only child left, his daughter Imogen, or Inogen, has secretly married her lover Posthumus Leonatus, an otherwise honorable man of Cymbeline's court. The lovers have exchanged jewelry as tokens, Imogen now with a bracelet, and Posthumus with a ring. Cymbeline dismisses the marriage and banishes Posthumus, since Imogen, as Cymbeline's only child, must produce a fully royal-blooded heir to succeed to the British throne. In the meantime, Cymbeline's queen is conspiring to have Cloten, her cloddish and arrogant son by an earlier marriage, married to Imogen, to secure her bloodline. The queen is also plotting to murder both Imogen and Cymbeline, procuring what she believes to be deadly poison from the court doctor, Cornelius, who, suspicious, switches the poison with a harmless sleeping potion. The queen passes the poison along to Pisanio, Posthumus and Imogen's loving servant, who is led to believe it is a medicinal drug. No longer able to be with her banished Posthumus, Imogen secludes herself in her chambers, away from Cloten's aggressive advances. Giacomo stealing Imogen's bracelet. Act 2 Scene E. Illustration by Lewis Reed. Designed for an edition of Lamb's Tales. Copyrighted 1918. Posthumus must now live in Italy, where he meets Iascimo, or Giacomo, who challenges the prideful Posthumus to a bet that he, Iascimo, can seduce Imogen, who Posthumus has praised for her chastity, and then bring Posthumus proof of Imogen's adultery. If Iascimo wins, he will get Posthumus's token ring. If Posthumus wins, not only must Iascimo pay him but also fight Posthumus in a duel with swords. Iascimo heads to Britain where he aggressively attempts to seduce the faithful Imogen, who sends him packing. Iascimo then hides in a chest in Imogen's bedchamber and, when the princess falls asleep, emerges to steal from her Posthumus's bracelet. He also takes note of the room and Imogen's partly naked body to be able to present false evidence to Posthumus that he has seduced his bride. Returning to Italy, Iascimo convinces Posthumus that he has successfully seduced Imogen. In his wrath, Posthumus sends 2 letters to Britain, one to Imogen, telling her to meet him at Milford Haven, on the Welsh coast, the other to the servant Pisanio, ordering him to murder Imogen at the haven. However, Pisanio refuses to kill Imogen and reveals to her Posthumus's plot. He has Imogen disguise herself as a boy and continue to Milford Haven to seek employment. He also gives her the queen's poison, believing it will alleviate her psychological distress. In the guise of a boy, Imogen adopts the name Fidel, meaning faithful. Quote, back at Cymbeline's court, Cymbeline refuses to pay his British tribute to the Roman ambassador Caius Lucius, and Lucius warns Cymbeline of the Roman emperor's forthcoming wrath, which will amount to an invasion of Britain by Roman troops. Meanwhile, Cloten learns of the meeting between Imogen and Posthumus at Milford Haven. Dressing himself enviously in Posthumus's clothes, he decides to go to Wales to kill Posthumus, and then rape, abduct, and marry Imogen. Imogen has now been traveling as Fidel through the Welsh mountains, her health in decline as she comes to a cave, the home of Belarius, along with his sons Polydore and Cadwal, whom he raised into great hunters. These two young men are in fact the British princes Guiderius and Arviragus, who themselves do not realize their own origin. The men discover Fidel, and instantly captivated by a strange affinity for him, become fast friends. Outside the cave, Guiderius is met by Cloten, who throws insults, leading to a sword fight during which Guiderius beheads Cloten. Meanwhile, Imogen's fragile state worsens and she takes the poison as a hopeful medicine. When the men re-enter, they find her dead. Quote, they mourn and, after placing Cloten's body beside hers, briefly depart to prepare for the double burial. Imogen awakes to find the headless body, and believes it to be posthumous due to the fact the body is wearing posthumous clothes. Lucius's Roman soldiers have just arrived in Britain and, as the army moves through Wales, Lucius discovers the devastated Fidel, who pretends to be a loyal servant grieving for his killed master. Lucius, moved by this faithfulness, enlists Fidel as a page boy. The treacherous queen is now wasting away due to the disappearance of her son Cloten. Meanwhile, despairing of his life, a guilt-ridden Posthumus enlists in the Roman forces as they begin their invasion of Britain. Belarius, Guiderius, Arviragus, and Posthumus all help rescue Cymbeline from the Roman onslaught. The king does not yet recognize these four, yet takes notice of them as they go on to fight bravely and even capture the Roman commanders, Lucius and Iachimo, thus winning the day. Posthumus, allowing himself to be captured, as well as Fidel, are imprisoned alongside the true Romans, all of whom await execution. In jail, Posthumus sleeps, while the ghosts of his dead family appear to complain to Jupiter of his grim fate. Jupiter himself then appears in thunder and glory to assure the others that destiny will grant happiness to Posthumus and Britain. Cornelius arrives in the court to announce that the queen has died suddenly, and that on her deathbed she unrepentantly confessed villainous schemes against her husband and his throne. Both troubled and relieved at this news, Cymbeline prepares to execute his new prisoners, but pauses when he sees Fidel, whom he finds both beautiful and somehow familiar. Fidel has noticed Posthumus' ring on Iachimo's finger and abruptly demands to know from where the jewel came. A remorseful Iachimo tells of his bet, and how he could not seduce Imogen, yet tricked Posthumus into thinking he had. Posthumus then comes forward to confirm Iachimo's story, revealing his identity and acknowledging his wrongfulness in desiring Imogen killed. Ecstatic, Imogen throws herself at Posthumus, who still takes her for a boy and knocks her down. Pisanio then rushes forward to explain that Fidel is Imogen in disguise. Imogen still suspects that Pisanio conspired with the queen to give her the poison. Pisanio sincerely claims innocence, and Cornelius reveals how the poison was a non-fatal potion all along, insisting that his betrayal years ago was a setup. Belarius makes his own happy confession, revealing Guiderius and Arviragus as Cymbeline's own two long-lost sons. With her brothers restored to their place in the line of inheritance, Imogen is now free to marry Posthumus. An elated Cymbeline pardons Belarius and the Roman prisoners, including Lucius and Iachimo. Lucius calls forth his soothsayer to decipher a prophecy of recent events, which ensures happiness for all, blaming his manipulative queen for his refusal to pay earlier. Cymbeline now agrees to pay the tribute to the Roman emperor as a gesture of peace between Britain and Rome, and he invites everyone to a great feast. Date and text. The first recorded production of Cymbeline, as noted by Simon Forman, was in April 1611. It was first published in the First Folio in 1623. When Cymbeline was actually written cannot be precisely dated. The Yale edition suggests a collaborator had a hand in the authorship, and some scenes, e. g. Act 3 Scene 7 and Act 5 Scene 2, may strike the reader as particularly un-Shakespearean when compared with others. The play shares notable similarities in language, situation and plot with Beaumont and Fletcher's tragicomedy Philaster, or Love Lies a Bleeding, c. 1609-10. Both plays concern themselves with a princess who, after disobeying her father in order to marry a lowly lover, is wrongly accused of infidelity and thus ordered to be murdered, before escaping and having her faithfulness proven. Furthermore, both were written for the same theatre company and audience. The editors of the Oxford and Norton Shakespeare believe the name of Imogen is a misprint for Inogen. They draw several comparisons between Cymbeline and Much Ado About Nothing, in early editions of which a ghost character named Inogen was supposed to be Leonato's wife, Posthumus being also known as Leonatus, the Latin form of the Italian name in the other play. Stanley Wells and Michael Dobson point out that Holinshed's Chronicles, which Shakespeare used as a source, mention an Inogen, and that Forman's eyewitness account of the April 1611 performance refers to Inogen throughout. Reputation. This play has many just sentiments, some natural dialogues, and some pleasing scenes, but they are obtained at the expense of much incongruity. To remark the folly of the fiction, the absurdity of the conduct, the confusion of the names and manners of different times, and the impossibility of the events in any system of life, were to waste criticism upon unresisting imbecility, upon faults too evident for detection, and too gross for aggravation. Lytton Strachey famously found it difficult to resist the conclusion that some have taken the convoluted plot as evidence that the play deliberately parodies its own content. Harold Bloom says, Cymbeline, in my judgment, is partly a Shakespearean self-parody. Many of his prior plays and characters are mocked by it. Quote, Performance history. Following the performance mentioned by Forman, the play was revived at court for Charles I and Henrietta Maria in 1634. Garrick rearranged some scenes. In particular, he shortened Imogen's burial scene and the entire fifth act, omitting the dream of Posthumus. The production was highly praised. The play entered the Romantic era with John Philip Kemble's company in 1801. Kemble added a dance to Clotton's comic wooing of Imogen. In 1827, his brother Charles mounted an antiquarian production at Covent Garden. It featured costumes designed after the descriptions of the ancient British by such writers as Julius Caesar and Diodorus Siculus. William Charles Macready mounted the play several times between 1837 and 1842. At the Theatre Royal, Marylebone, an Epicene production was staged with Mary Warner, Fanny Vining, Anna Cora Mowat, and Edward Loomis Davenport. In 1864, as part of the celebrations of Shakespeare's birth, Samuel Phelps performed the title role at Theatre Royal, Drury Lane. Helena Fawcett returned to the stage for this performance. The play was also one of Ellen Terry's last performances with Henry Irving at the Lyceum in 1896. Terry's performance was widely praised, though Irving was judged an indifferent Iashimo. Like Garrick, Irving removed the dream of Posthumus. He also curtailed Iashimo's remorse and attempted to render Clotton's character consistent. A review in the Athenaeum compared this trimmed version to pastoral comedies such as You Like It. The set design, overseen by Lawrence Alma Tadema, was lavish and advertises historically accurate, though the reviewer for the time complained of such anachronisms as gold crowns and printed books as props. Similarly lavish but less successful was Margaret Mather's production in New York in 1897. The sets and publicity cost $40. But Mather was judged too emotional and undisciplined to succeed in a fairly cerebral role. Barry Jackson staged a modern dress production for the Birmingham Rep in 1923. 2 years before his influential modern dress Hamlet. Walter Nugent Monk brought his Meadowmarket Theatre production to Stratford in 1946, inaugurating the post-war tradition of the play. London saw 2 productions in the 1956 season. Michael Benthall directed the less successful production. At the Old Vic, the set designed by Audrey Cruddas was notably minimal, with only a few essential props. She relied instead on a variety of lighting effects to reinforce mood. Actors seemed to come out of darkness and return to darkness. Barbara Shefford was criticized as too cold and formal for Imogen. Leon Gluckman played Posthumus, Derek Godfrey Iashumo, and Derek Francis Cymbeline. Following Victorian practice, Benthall drastically shortened the last act. By contrast, Peter Hall's production of the Shakespeare Memorial presented nearly the entire play, including the long-neglected dream scene. Although a golden eagle designed for Jupiter turned out too heavy for the stage machinery and was not used, Hall's approach attempted to unify the play's diversity by means of a fairy tale topos. The next major Royal Shakespeare Company production, in 1962, went in the opposite direction, working on a set draped with heavy white sheets. Director William Gaskill employed Brechtian alienation effects. To mixed critical reviews, Bernard Levin complained that the bare set deprived the play of necessary scenic splendor. The acting, however, was widely praised. Vanessa Redgrave as Imogen was often compared favorably to Ashcroft. Eric Porter was a success as Giacomo, as was Clive Swift as Cloten. Patrick Allen was Posthumus, and Tom Fleming played the title role. A decade later, John Barton's 1974 production for the RSC, with assistance from Clifford Williams, featured Sebastian Shaw in the title role, Tim Pigott-Smith as Posthumus, Ian Richardson as Giacomo, and Susan Fleetwood as Imogen. Charles Keating was Cloten, as with contemporary productions of Pericles. This one used a narrator, Cornelius, to signal changes in mood and treatment to the audience. Robert Spieth disliked the set design, which he called too minimal, but he approved the acting. In 1980, David Jones revived the play for the RSC. The production was in general a disappointment, although Judi Dench as Imogen received reviews that rivaled Ashcroft's. Ben Kingsley played Giacomo. Roger Rees was Posthumus. In 1987, Bill Alexander directed the play in the other place, later transferring to the pit in London's Barbican Centre, with Harriet Walter playing Imogen, David Bradley as Cymbeline and Nicholas Farrell as Posthumus. At the Stratford Festival, the play was directed in 1970 by Jean Gaskin and in 1987 by Robin Phillips. The latter production, which was marked by much approved scenic complexity, featured Colm Feore as Giacomo, and Martha Burns as Imogen. The play was again at Stratford in 2005. Directed by David Latham, a large medieval tapestry unified the fairly simple stage design and underscored Latham's fairy tale-inspired direction. At the New Globe Theatre in 2001, a cast of 6, including Abigail Thaw, Mark Rylance, and Richard Hope, used extensive doubling for the play. The cast wore identical costumes even when in disguise, allowing for particular comic effects related to doubling, as when Cloten attempts to disguise himself as Posthumus. There have been some well-received major theatrical productions, including 1998's Public Theatre production in New York City directed by André Serbin. Cymbeline was also performed at the Cambridge Arts Theatre in October 2007 in a production directed by Sir Trevor Nunn, who sought to recapture the essence of the play as a story narrative, and in November 2007 at the Chicago Shakespeare Theatre. The play was included in the 2013 repertory season of the Oregon Shakespeare Festival. In 2004 and 2014, the Hudson Shakespeare Company of New Jersey produced 2 distinct versions of the play. The 2004 production, directed by John Ciccarelli, embraced the fairy tale Disney aspect of the story and produced a colorful version with wicked stepmothers, feisty princesses and a campy ʻsɪmbᵻliːn. The 2014 version, directed by Rachel Alt, went in a completely opposite direction and placed the action on a ranch in the American Old West. The queen was a Southern belle married to a rancher with Imogen as a high society girl in love with the cowhand posthumous. In 2013, Samir Bamra directed the play for physical productions alike. In 2016, Melly still directed ʻsɪmbᵻliːn at the Royal Shakespeare Company. This version of the play was performed at the Royal Shakespeare Theatre before moving to the Barbican in late 2016. The performance featured Bethan Cullinane as Imogen and Gillian Bevan as ʻsɪmbᵻliːn. Adaptations. The play was adapted by Thomas Durfee as The Injured Princess, or The Fatal Wager. This version was produced at the Theatre Royal, Drury Lane, presumably by the United King's Company and Duke's Company, in 1682. Some details of this alteration survived in productions at least until the middle of the century. William Hawkins revised the play again in 1759. His was among the last of the heavy revisions designed to bring the play in line with classical unities. He cut the Queen, reduced the action to 2 places, the court and a forest in Wales. Nearer the end of the century, Henry Brooke wrote an adaptation which was apparently never staged. His version eliminates the brothers altogether as part of a notable enhancement of posthumous role in the play. George Bernard Shaw, who criticized the play perhaps more harshly than he did any of Shakespeare's other works, took aim at what he saw as the defects of the final act in his 1937 ʻsɪmbᵻliːn refinished. As early as 1896, he had complained about the absurdities of the play to Ellen Terry, then preparing to act Imogen. He called it stagey trash of the lowest melodramatic order. He later changed his view, saying it was one of the finest of Shakespeare's later plays, but he remained convinced that it goes to pieces in the final act. Screen adaptations. Elijah Mushinski directed the BBC television Shakespeare adaptation in 1983, ignoring the ancient British period setting in favour of a more timeless and snow-laden atmosphere, inspired by Rembrandt and his contemporary Dutch painters, Richard Johnson, Claire Bloom, Helen Mirren, and Robert Lindsay play ʻsɪmbᵻliːn, his queen, Imogen, and Giacomo, respectively, with Michael Pennington as posthumous. In 2013, Ethan Hawke re-teamed with director Michael Almereyda to star in a film adaptation in which Hawke plays ʻsɪmbᵻliːn. An operatic adaptation by American composer Christopher Berg exists.